Awesome. Steve, appreciate you talking with me today. Steve is a local realtor working for EXP. And why don't you just tell us your story, Steve? How'd you get into real estate? What was that journey like for you?
Hey, RJ, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. So yeah, my story, I think, I'd go back to a little bit about, how I got into real estate was kind of my experience trying to sell my own house. It was about 15 years ago. I was in Snohomish, and I bought a house for the family that was a large, four-bedroom, 3,200 square foot house, and raised the kids for a number of, about 10 years in it. And over that time, I just kind of lived in the house. I didn't really do anything to keep it up except for, any minor repairs and things like that. But, you get your carpeting and it gets stained from the dog or the kids, and, you decide to make some design changes. You paint the color of a bedroom purple, for your daughter,
Yeah, sure.
various things like that. And, you use the kitchen, and, it's got a nice tile countertop. Over time, the water deteriorates some of the grout and starts not looking great, but, functionally it's fine. So you end up, like, over my sort of 10 years living in the house, we put some wear and tear on it. And I think when I went to sell it, I thought, I remembered the realtor that, was involved in selling us the house said, "This is the best floor plan in the neighborhood. Everybody loves this floor plan. It's so popular. They're rarely up for sale, and how lucky we are to get one," right? So I had this stuck in my mind as, well, when I go to sell this house, it'll be easy. Everybody wants this
Yeah.
floor plan and be in this neighborhood. But turned out that wasn't the case.
Did you buy it brand new? Was it brand new when you bought it?
No, so we bought the house, and it was about 10 years old when we bought it. And so when I went to sell it, it was, going on 20 years. And yeah, anyway, now you're dealing with a house that has 20 years of wear and tear, and questions come up like, does it need a new roof? Should I be painting the exterior of my house? And, what sorts of things? I had a back deck, was originally painted by the former owner. And over the years, that paint deteriorated and the deck looked horrible. It was like everywhere you looked in this house, there was something that you should probably do to make it
Yeah.
look, to be able to get top dollar for the house.
10 years goes quick, right? You're busy, you got kids, it goes quick, and sometimes you don't think about a lot of maybe the stuff you should be doing. You're just like,
Right.
hey, it works. It works. We're surviving. We're going to work.
Well,
Everybody's happy and healthy.
That's right. It's like, is the roof leaking? Well, no. Is the kitchen countertop not functional? No, it's fine. It's white tile countertop. But, what happened too right around the time that I went to go to sell my house is the side of the hill that the subdivision was on, they had opened up a whole new bit of land, and they were going to build, another 30 homes down there. So living in the suburbs, where land was still relatively plentiful, and there was a lot of growth, you end up with new developments coming in, and they're coming in with, quartz countertops and more modern lighting and more modern looking designs, and, and all sorts of things that the new home buyers or people moving to the area are thinking, hey, I want a new house. I want these new modern designs and finishes. And you've got to compete with that.
Right. What was it about that process that really pushed you towards real estate, do you think? Was there one key moment that you remember you're like, oh, I need to help people avoid this pain that I've created for myself?
Well, I sort of grew up with a father who did everything himself, and it was a sort of a blessing and a curse. He instilled in me this idea that he says, why pay somebody for something you could do yourself?
Sure.
And so
Sure.
I had that idea of, well, I'll figure out how to fix things and do things. And when it came to selling my house, I thought, what's it going to cost me? Well, the house I figured was going to get a little bit more than $700,000. So I did the math and figured, well, the average, standard commission on, for realtors is 6% total to sell the house. And I said, well, that's $42,000. Like, what are these realtors going to do for me that is worth $42,000? And so I thought,
Right.
I could do this. I'm gonna read a book about selling your house on your own and do some research. And I ended up basically trying to become a realtor on my own and hoping that or really believing that would be fine. But as the story unfolds, I ended up putting my house on the market, thinking all I had to do was get it on Zillow, right? And the buyers would come, they would check it out, they would fall in love with the floor plan and make me an offer. But I even went a step further and found a discount broker that would get me on the MLS. Just pay a nominal fee, and at least I'll be distributed to all these sites. So really, having a background in internet marketing, and that's kind of what I did in my career, I thought I'm just going to bypass all these agents and get online, and people will come to my house.
Sure.
Unfortunately,
Which is probably what a lot of people are saying even now, right? And I'm thinking of this even as you're saying it, in the face of whatever this NAR settlement stuff is, like, oh yeah, I can do that myself. So, I mean, how did that work out for you?
well, it was, what do they say, crickets? And
Sure.
And funny thing too, I didn't just put like the standard for sale by owner sign in front of my house and just be like, think that's enough. I actually went out to the sign company that provided signs for realtors, hired them to put a post in the ground with a full frame. And I designed my own logo. I made myself look like I was sort of a real estate company, so that
Nice.
people driving by would see, oh, this is like a typical real estate, listing. And they
Yeah.
would just pick up. I made my own flyers. And they would call me, and everything would be great. I think what I found out was that even with all these fancy signs and trying to hold my own open houses, nobody showed up. And I thought, why isn't anyone coming to this house? I know that the photos were my own and weren't great, but still, it's in the right neighborhood. It's great design. The only thing I could come up with was, to some degree, that people want to work with a broker to buy a house. They don't, I think, perceive that it costs them any money to do that. So why wouldn't they? And
Sure.
and I think, and it's, awkward probably to call a homeowner who's trying to sell a house on their own for most people and start, negotiating for your own, on your own.
Sure.
But
Sure. They want that professional buffer, right? I think that's something that maybe people don't quantify very much, or are able to quantify. And they're like, actually, I don't want to have a hard conversation. Or maybe I think I've had clients even in the past that see the for sale by owner, and it's either like, oh, we're going to totally do this thing over here completely, and it's going to be great, until it's not, because there's so many complicated details. Or then they go, oh, well, we're going to have representation, but they're not. So are they just really difficult to work with? It's almost like the facade of working on your own is like, oh, they can't get along with a realtor, so how are we going to have our realtor get along with them? It's like, you're difficult to work with. That's what that means for sale by owner. But you're marketer, turned DIYer. You got your DIY realtor, sign in the yard. Do you think it was a little bit of the market? I mean, what was the transition like from DIY realtoring to hiring a professional? What was that process like for you? And then how did that eventually resolve itself? Like, what was the sale of the home like?
yeah, well, ultimately, after not getting any action and trying various things, I went back to the person who listed the house when I had bought it, and he happened to be a neighbor of mine that I'd gotten to know over the years, and I sort of had to come crawling back to him with my tail between my legs, saying,
Sure.
"Can you help me sell my house?"
Yeah. How long did you have it listed before you reached out to him?
I think it was a good,
Okay.
and
That's like an eternity. That feels like
it
that's a
certainly
long
felt
4
like-
months.
And I,
as a
I
seller.
thought that I was timing it well, like I was listing it in the summer, before the summer, that there'd be a big rush for families to move and get into the school system, things like that. But yeah, I reached out to him. I did sign on with him to list the house, and lo and behold, people started showing up to see it. Initially, we did relatively minor things to get the house ready for sale, like paint, overpaint, paint over the purple walls, and some of the personal decoration choices. We removed lots of personal items. I got rid of a lot of things. Tried to reduce clutter, but I didn't do any staging, any professional staging. I really still was sort of on the line of trying to kind of, do minimal work.
Sure, sure.
And I started, as we started getting feedback on the house, I thought people would come in and make an offer and say, well, we'll give you a $10,000 carpet allowance to replace that, or we'll give you a paint allowance or something. But I just, I didn't get any offers. Instead, we just got a lot of criticism about the condition. So, I took that to heart and started remodeling the house. So we ended up actually taking it off the market, and while I got these remodeling projects started, and
yeah, the famous phrase, and then COVID.
And then COVID hit. So yeah, once I finally got a lot of the remodeling done, we were in a phase where realtors couldn't even show houses, and so that led to a little bit of a delayed relaunch. But we got back on the market, and eventually, in that summer, got a reasonable offer that was actually more than what I had originally, hoped to get.
Sure. And some of that, might have been market related, I think, some of that. But what was so when you bring in the realtor, what was that conversation like? Were a lot of those things did he say, hey, look, we got to do this, this, and this? Did he kind of come in with a game plan?
Actually, I think he was more the mindset of, you've already done a bunch of, minor things. Let's put it on the market and, see what the response is. I think that, to get a home sold quickly, you don't want to introduce the idea of doing a bunch of remodeling, because that can be a many months long project.
Oh, sure. I mean, more on that front end. Like when you're like, I haven't sold it. It's been 4 months. Did he come in and say, hey, here's a game plan? Like declutter. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. Was there a lot of that stood out to you?
Yeah, unfortunately, no, I didn't get that from him. And he was one of the top selling realtors in the area. Maybe it was buried in one of his presentation books as, do these things,
sure.
as a list of things to do. But yeah, in the hindsight, that was a little bit of this, the driver that compelled me to become an agent was, I felt like I had gained a lot of knowledge in this process around what a home needs to be like, needs to look like, and what condition it needs to be in to get top dollar, and how much prep work it can take. So, I thought I could provide a real, consultative service to homeowners that would help them understand sort of what they needed to do to get their home in their condition it needs to be, to get, multiple offers and have it get the most potential return on it. So, moving to Bellingham and becoming a realtor, I've started learning how the market was a lot different in Bellingham. In certain neighborhoods, you'd see a home that definitely needed work go on the market and get a price that was shockingly strong for it. So there's this whole aspect of trying to understand where is your home? What's the market like right now? What are the interest rates? What's the supply? So there's so many different factors that can go into really that decision around, should I replace my roof? Should I remodel my kitchen? Do I need to do these things to get my house sold? And really, I think you need to hire, get a professional in there who has access to the tools and the data around what's going on in the market, to be able to guide you. Because you may end up going down a path thinking, oh, I need to remodel, and you really didn't need to, and you wasted a bunch of time and money on it. In another case, maybe you think, I'm not going to do anything, and the reality is you get out there and your home sits for a few months and you don't get any offers because you're competing with newer construction.
Right. Which are the exact lessons you learned, right? What was, when you got in, and so now so now the home doesn't quite sell, you're getting some feedback. Let's just, sweep COVID over here. So now you're ready to list, when you're getting ready to list, what were some of the major things that you tackled? And as you kind of focused on some of those house projects, what's some advice you would give to people who are maybe owning a home for the first time, or are thinking about selling the home maybe the next 3, 6, 12 months, what are some things that you learned as the master DIYer that are like, hey, you got to tackle this and you should be doing this every year, every month? Were there like a few specific things that you really found were important as you started tackling some of those projects?
Yeah, well, for sure, one of the things that I looked at was trying to understand what is the condition certain things are in, and how long would it last, before I needed to do something about it. So it's kind of the things you don't see, like your roof. You don't really think about your roof. And so as I started,
Until something breaks.
wait until you
Yeah,
start
you're
getting a
like,
leak, or I don't know,
mhm.
maybe you look up at the roof and you see the shingles are curling up, and it looks like the granulars are all gone, and it doesn't look so good visually. I started trying to find a roofer to give me a quote on redoing my roof. I figured it was about time. It's been 20 years, and I learned that there's a wide range of pricing out there for that sort of project. I was getting bids anywhere from 12,000 to 20,000, and so and I was trying to really go distill it down to the same kind of material, the same product they were putting on, and there's a lot of complicated decisions you could make about putting a roof on. But at the end of the day, had I just called one contractor and it was the $20,000 guy and I made that decision, I would have spent $20,000 and maybe I could have gotten just as good a work, the same product easily for 15.
Wow.
So, I think, and I spoke to a neighbor about this, and she was sort of more of the mindset of, I just hire the first guy that comes along because I don't want to deal with contractors. So my advice, though, is as a homeowner, you could save thousands and thousands of dollars by just getting that, going out and getting 3 bids.
Yeah, the magic number.
And it's also good because you'll get contractors. Like, one guy came in and wrote me a bid on a scrap piece of paper, and his truck was kind of beat up. Like, okay, that was a pretty low bid, but the trust there with that contractor wasn't real high.
Sure,
Another guy
sure.
came in, and they were the ones that advertised on television. They had a fancy truck and a salesman, and showed me different product. He was the high end of the spectrum. Anyway, just you learn a lot, but it does take time, and it's one of the things as a realtor that I wanted, started to try to do, is build out that resource of who are the service providers and contractors that do great work. They're trustworthy, they're on time, they've got a good price that's that's affordable, or at least a good. They're not gouging anybody. So yeah, doing those projects, by hiring them out, I would always recommend getting multiple bids and just meeting
Yeah.
the people. But yeah, and some of the other stuff, like, I realized, I could do this work myself. YouTube is an amazing resource. You just
Right.
you want to redo your bathroom or put in some new drywall, just YouTube it and follow the instructions.
Sure. What could go wrong?
I definitely enjoy doing that kind of work, and I enjoy, having
Sure.
the satisfaction of having, finishing the job and looking back. But I have to say that in every project you get into, you have to plan for at least 3 trips to the home improvement store. You know, one trip is to get the
Right.
things you think you need, and then the second trip is to get the things you actually need. And I think the third trip is to get the things that you broke in the process of trying to do the work. And
You bought the wrong size.
But yeah, I learned that you can do a lot of this work yourself. And you can hire out some pieces. For instance, I hired out a company to come in and install new quartz countertops. Now, I did all the demolition work. I pulled out the old countertops, so I saved myself tons of money by
Yeah.
doing sort of the dirty work, and getting it ready. And
Right.
another tip on that is that I went right to a supplier of the countertops who did the cutting and had the raw materials, and asked to see what their remnants look like, because I thought, I just need, to up level the countertops so I can advertise that they are quartz countertops. They didn't all have to be perfect or match. So it turns out, they have a back lot, so to speak, of, leftovers or pieces they couldn't use, and they're much less expensive than, picking from, the sample book. So that's one way you can save a bunch of money is, look for those opportunities.
Yeah. Did you have like a rule that were like, hey, if it's this type of work, I'm not going to do it, or something that you didn't feel comfortable with? Like, what was your gauge and when you knew you had to hire a professional?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. As I generally think I can do everything,
Right.
but then I realize, well, certain things like installing a countertop and marrying the two pieces of quartz together requires
Sure.
special equipment. It also is dang heavy. I'm not necessarily going to lift this thing on my own. So there are periods where it's just like, that's really kind of above my skill level, and I don't want to try to learn it. For inevitably too, a lot of times you pay for certain things, and the cost to install it is included. So I did
True.
my legwork to shop for the countertops and saved my money there. And I did pay something as part of the bundle to have them installed.
Yeah.
I also
Well, that's
did
true.
the same thing with a shower. Really nice, glass enclosure to replace the old aluminum framed, glass that just not in style anymore. And so buying, going on and online, finding some different suppliers, pricing them, and then, they were all generally pretty competitive. But they come out, you have to prepare the area, and but once it's ready to go, they'll install nice shower glass. And that's something I figure if, as one of your criteria is, if it's likely that I'm going to break this $2,000 piece of shower glass putting it in,
Right.
I might want to hire somebody to do that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, specialized equipment, that's probably a first
Yeah.
giveaway, but also finish work. So you mentioned something I think is a great point. You could do the dirty work, right? You could do a lot of the prep work and stuff yourself, and then, yeah, hire somebody to come in, do the finish work, make the seams look nice, make it look pretty. Same thing with like cabinets. Like hire somebody to paint your cabinets. So you want those things to look nice, right?
I
If you
did
want it
paint
to
the
look
I did
good,
also paint the cabinets. But
yeah. If
that
you want it to look good,
I got a bid. So my cabinets were this sort of like light oak, blonde oak, whatever,
mm-hmm.
or, and generally speaking, they didn't look horrible. The newer styles weren't going with that color anymore. But the problem was the sun had come in over the years and faded certain parts of cabinets, and you also had some water splashings or other things that deteriorated. So there were pieces of the cabinets that just weren't great. And I started with the idea of, well, maybe I can sort of clean this up and freshen up the finish, which was a mistake because the first time I did that, I ended up putting this, a new sort of stain on the cabinet, and if that wasn't going to work, well, you can't leave it that way. So I had to do all of the cabinets. And it is a huge job.
Yeah.
I had somebody quote me $7,000 to repaint my cabinets. And I thought, oh my God, $7,000 to put some paint on the cabinets? That's a lot, right?
Yeah.
After pulling all the doors off and pulling all the hardware off and sanding them and then putting multiple coats on, and $7,000 might have been a bargain.
Yeah, so some of it, yeah, maybe there isn't a rule for every job, but sometimes on the other end of it, you're like, yeah,
Yeah. Another really important rule to communicate is that if you're doing something that puts you at risk of physical harm,
oh,
such
sure,
as trying to paint the trim on your two-story house, where it's really hard to reach and you're doing it like laying on your roof with a paintbrush
yep.
kind of on the side like that.
Clark Griswold,
I've heard a number of stories of serious injury of people falling off the roof. So,
yeah,
I attempted it. I was pretty comfortable with heights. However, I really wouldn't want to be recommending, if it requires like getting up in high places or being high up on a ladder. If it's not something you're really comfortable with, hire somebody to do it.
So you're just in like shotgun mode, right? Trying to get this house sold. And I eventually do want to hear about the home selling piece. But as you're in this process, what are some of the things that stood out to you that were like, oh, I should have been doing this the whole time I was owning, right? For anyone who's owning a home for the first time or kind of getting in that mode, like what were some of the things that you felt like you neglected and you didn't really realize it?
Well, yeah, some of the things would be just general updating of, basic finishes that wear out, like carpets. Had I replaced I did ultimately replace the carpets, but I should have replaced it more during the process. the hardwood floors, had started to have some issues in different places, and I didn't do anything because it didn't seem materially impactful, but it'd be a good idea to, keep up with sort of the design trends. So, and part of the reason is so that, you're budgeting for these things, and I would add that concept of budgeting to the mix. When
Yes.
condo owners buy a condo, they end up with a fairly high homeowners association fee or condo association fee. And that fee covers a lot of this, these higher cost improvements like the roof and the siding and painting and these exterior things. Well, I believe that, as a first-time home buyer, you really should create a budget of how much you need every month to put away in an account that is for your sort of home upkeep and maintenance. And
Sure,
then
yeah.
when you go to need the new roof or new carpet or replace the flooring, you've got the money already there, and you're not going into debt to do these updates.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, you can really walk into a home and know, right? Maybe it's hard to know how long you'll be there, but just to say, hey, look, this is a 20-year roof. We're going to need a new one in 10 years. It's going to cost us X dollars. So if we, start saving now, you can do the math. It's not a bad idea. Build out your home maintenance schedule there. That's not a bad idea. Spreadsheet people will be happy about that one. But I think
That's right.
I think that's the important piece is like you can actually on these things and plan and prepare for these things before you're forced to do them. And worst case scenario, like yourself, right? You're kind of forced to do them when you're like down to the end and you're like, no, I'm trying to sell this thing. You're like, now I got to do all this stuff that I didn't do. Shoot. Was there a big one that totally surprised you too?
I'm sorry, there's one update or?
Yeah. Was there something you're like, man, I didn't even know this was an issue and now it was a huge headache?
Yeah, well, I can say about sort of one thing that turned into a bigger headache than I expected. And, that was the siding of the house. So, there was some minor deterioration of siding above some windows. And, it resulted in me getting a siding guy out there to kind of replace these boards. And they hadn't been painted yet with the color of the rest of the house. But that addressed the siding issue. Well, when I went to go sell the house, finally, it was one of the last things that didn't get done. And somebody who ultimately bought the house did initially, after their inspection, come back and ask me to replace all of the siding because they felt that, if one or two of these boards needed to be replaced, well, maybe they all need to be replaced.
Yeah.
So I think that is a big caution for people is if you neglect certain things, even though they might be kind of minor, and you think, well, it's only a few $1,000s to fix it, you may end up with a buyer who's coming and asking you for a $50,000 credit or allowance to do this repair.
Just because
that
it
was
wasn't.
kind of one of the
Yeah.
biggest.
Okay, so you eventually sold the house. Tell us about that process.
Eventually, well, I'm not sure.
And how long was the process altogether, you think, from first time you put that sign in the ground?
Well, I started doing the work to get the house ready to sell, and I think when I put it on the market, it wasn't myself. When I tried to sell by myself, it ended up being about 2 years before I finally got the house sold because I, again, had tried it myself, tried to use an agent, and didn't have the updates done, went and did remodeling, and COVID hit, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it was a long timeline.
But you got it listed, right? You kind of through the weird part of the pandemic where we're like, okay, we can actually go back to work, kind of. You get it listed again. What was the activity like on the other side of it?
It was slow still. Coming out of the pandemic, it was still, we tried to list it just as soon as, realtors were able to show again, So it was still a lot, it was long before vaccines came out and and long before people decided to really make an exodus out of the cities for, to move to the suburbs when they could work from home before remote working really took off. So it was still relatively slow. The timing turned out wasn't great. I did get a good offer, but I think the big shocker to me was had I held the house for 2 more years, I would have doubled my price.
Yeah, that was a crazy couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's I did great on the house still. Nevertheless, I mean, a
Hmm.
home investment has been the best investment I've ever made. Uh, period.
Yeah. And you
You
got
really.
your associate's degree in real estate and home improvement. So there you go, your 2-year degree.
That's right. Well, yeah, I said, I guess back to your original question, at the start, what got me into real estate is just, feeling like I really enjoyed the process of, ultimately, I know as painful as it sounds, I did enjoy the process of trying to get homes sold and get, top dollar for it. And I see so many situations now where, if people would start planning for that home sale or their change, years before it's likely to happen, they're going to be so much better off when the time comes when they do either for life circumstances need to make a change, need to make a move, or when they've planned on their next, home move, whether it's downsizing or a growing family moving into a bigger home. Either way, I think it's important to just work with a professional.
Hmm.
And the good news is, realtors don't charge any fees to be your consultant, your trusted advisor for all of those years
Right.
during home ownership.
Yeah.
It's an amazing value. So find a good
Yeah.
one that you like and trust, and have them help you with that process of keeping your home in tip-top shape.
That's good. And something I've heard more and more too is like, hey, sure, and maybe, with some of the news stuff that's out there is realtors get a lot of flack on the transaction, but the good ones, the ones that really care for their clients are there when you're just trying to figure out what color to paint your bathroom. So take advantage of, yeah, make sure, and that's why it's important also for home buyers out there to know like, hey, that you like and you really trust the person that you're working with too. So it's a great piece of advice. So from the master marketer, master DIYer, you realize that there's that huge need for actually having a professional, and here you are. You're in the role, you're doing it.
That's right. Well, that's part of my main story and my main message to homeowners really is to develop relationships with people to help them with this home buying process. And it doesn't matter to me whether that home's going to be ready to sell next week or in 10 years. I want to build those relationships and help keep people up to date on sort of what the latest trends are and how the market is. One of the things I've done in my own neighborhood, and I'm expanding, is to create a group on Facebook that is sort of our neighborhood homeowner group. And I look forward to creating more of these and working with more homeowners in every neighborhood in Bellingham.
Perfect. That's awesome. Any last thoughts for us? I think you nailed it. Nothing.
This has been
You're
great.
good.
This has been great, RJ.
Thanks. You're good.